Hello and welcome to episode 460 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's been a fairly uneventful week for me personally. So that does link to something that I'm going to be talking about on the podcast this week. So it's kind of deliberate, but apart from that, Andy, I'm all good. So I'd just like to thank people who've been writing in with reviews. Please do keep them coming as ever. We will read them out on the podcast in the future. So do send in your reviews, 5 stars, of course. And do make sure you go and support the podcast. So go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast. There's a page on the Money to the Masses website. Make sure you bookmark that and make sure that you do sign up to the weekly newsletter. There's a whole host of ways that you can support the show. But more importantly, improve your own finances. There's a whole range of deals on there. Some of them are exclusive to the podcast listeners and Money to the Masses readers. So make sure you go and look at the page. And there's things from everything, including car insurance, home insurance, investment offers, cashback deals. So do make sure you bookmark that. But also let us know if you do use that, because we like to thank people who support the show.
Now, you mentioned it was a quiet week, and that links kind of quite nicely into the podcast this week. So explain what we've got coming up on this week's show.
So the 3 pieces this week are, well, there's a kind of element of frugality about 2 of them. And this month, I've been kind of following a bit of a zero spend month idea. So I'm going to do a piece on the podcast this week about a zero spend month. So the idea behind what I'm doing, but also talking about ways you can make it successful. It's basically a method of trying to budget and save a bit of money. The second piece I'm going to be talking about is in relation to mortgage rates and interest rates, importantly. So the Bank of England base rate, as we know, is 5.25%. We last talked about this 6 months ago on the podcast. We don't tend to talk about things that date the show, but in a world where there are still a lot of people who've got to come off of fixed mortgage deals, so old deals that are coming to an end where they have fixed them previously when mortgage rates were low. I'm going to be talking about what's going on with fixed rate mortgage deals. I'm going to be talking about what's going on with the Bank of England base rate and where the market thinks it will be in the future. And the final piece, which is going to be the first piece on this show, we're going to break with tradition actually, Andy. Often you finish the podcast off with a piece. You're going to be doing the first piece on the show this week in regards to holidaying.
Yes, so home swapping or home exchange. And I suppose we can go straight into it. So again, you mentioned that a couple of pieces on this week's podcast are all about frugality. We were looking about what we've done before on the podcast. And one thing that's been coming up again and again in the office in recent weeks, and as the sun has started to finally shine, we've been wearing shorts. People have been talking about holidays, and we were looking at various ways we could cover holidays on the podcast. We've done things before about buy now, fly later. We've done buy now, pay later, interest-free credit cards, things like that. But we've never covered this particular topic, and that is home swapping or home exchange. Now, I actually know someone who's done this. So let's start the podcast off by explaining exactly what this is. It's essentially where 2 parties agree to holiday in each other's homes for a set period of time at no cost. Now, it's becoming increasingly popular in recent weeks, largely thanks to the rising cost of traditional package holidays. They're going through the roof. I mean, average cost now of a European stay, now this isn't including flights, and even European and American stays, are somewhere in the region of £2,000 per week to go and stay somewhere. So that is significant. And when you add on the flights and everything else, we're talking, well, we know package holidays are coming in for a family of 4, somewhere around £5,000 or £6,000 for a standard average holiday.
Yeah, so this is particularly been come up when we're talking in the office and we're discussing about where we're going to go away this year. And in my own family, my children, they would love to go on holiday, but then I'm saying that we haven't got the money to do it because we need the money for other things. And of course, you're always trying to look at ways that you can cut the cost of holidaying. And of course, you can change the type of holiday you have. You can do a staycation. But this is kind of something that's interesting because you know somebody who's done it, which is where this also came from. You've got a friend who did this. So this isn't just coming up with some random idea. It was inspired by somebody who told you that they've done this. And of course, this isn't just a UK thing. I know you're going to go on to explain what it is, but you can swap homes effectively with people anywhere in the world.
Yeah, so if anyone's ever watched The Holiday, that's that famous Christmas movie with Cameron Diaz where two people swap homes. One person, I think, was in the Cotswolds and the other person was in LA or somewhere, and there was this magical idea that someone in LA could swap this cute little cottage in the Cotswolds at Christmas. And how realistic is that? Well, it's actually not far from the truth. You can actually ultimately do this through one of these holiday exchange or home swapping sites, and we'll explain exactly what it is. Another reason, by the way, that this is becoming increasingly popular is because of the phrase, and I hate the phrase, a workation. Now, in the post-lockdown world, lots of people now are looking for flexible ways to be able to work from home and have a home office environment. And where employers are becoming more, more accepting of people working from home, and also helping with the healthy element of helping people's mental health, they're allowing people effectively to work but also vacation at the same time. And they're using the phrase workation. It's a thing. So
it has this feel, Andy, as if you're sort of introducing an idea that you want to go on a workcation. So what you're saying, people aren't actually taking holiday from work. They are working from a different environment, which your employer's okay with. Rather than being in your own home, then they've okayed the idea that you might go abroad or somewhere else and you are having a holiday.
Yeah, and if you think
about holiday, you are working.
But if you think about it in terms of the home exchange thing, they're perfect properties to do it in, because they'll have things like Wi-Fi already set up. They'll have things like a home office set up, and essentially you can take you and your family away. You can still work. You get a free holiday. Everyone's a winner, probably except for the employer.
Yeah, but having said that, though, if they are working, then when they down tools at the end of the day, well, it means they're somewhere else that they and their family can go and do things, or they join their family. So getting back to how it actually works and what it is. So you go and sign up to a website, presumably, that allows you to swap your home with someone else at the same time.
Yeah, so holiday exchange websites, and there's lots of them. We'll come on to, and I'll name just a few later so you can go and have a look yourself. But they facilitate the swap. They will connect you and other people living in properties throughout the world. And some of these websites are membership only and some aren't. And we'll come into the pros and cons and why you would want to do a membership only one later. But swapping is possible with holiday homes. And in some cases, you can do holiday rental swaps. So if you're someone who's got a second home that's your holiday home, you can swap that so you can start holidaying in different places. You can actually do holiday swaps with a rental property, but you need to get agreement from your landlord. I would be very careful about that before you go down that route, but do have a look. You may be able to do it. Some sites also offer what's called a points-based system. So instead of doing a straight swap with another family where you just stay in each other's property, you could ultimately move out of your property for a week, let another family come and stay at yours, and you build up credit. You then use that credit to trade in later on with another family somewhere else who will do the same for you. They'll move out of their property. So rather than doing straight swaps, you sort of got this system where everyone's building up credit.
So it makes sense. What you're saying is that you haven't got to just swap with somebody who wants the same week off as you. They may be able to vacate their property for that week, and then you build up credit so you can use it another time.
Yeah.
I can see that. It's probably the less likely option. It's probably far easier just to swap houses if you can find somebody to swap with.
I know someone, again, who's done this, and the reason they did it, so they've recently, over the Easter period, they vacated their property and let another family stay, because what they've agreed to do a swap later in the year, but the property they're going to was actually higher in value in terms of points, so they needed additional points. Even though they're doing a straight swap, their property that they're swapping with is ultimately in a higher tier, if you like.
So you're going to explain this then? There's a tiering system in this as well?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, you can do straight swaps and it's between the two parties, but sometimes you do need additional points to sort of level the playing field. I'll quickly list off some other key benefits, because it's worth mentioning there are some on here that I wouldn't have even considered. Obviously, the main reason people would want to do this is to save money on accommodation costs. That goes without saying. But also, you can ask for the guests who come and stay at your property to carry out sort of minor tasks. So if you think about it, if you've got a garden in bloom, when you go away on holiday normally, you'd have to ask the neighbour or a family member to pop round and water the garden. Well, of course, if you've got someone staying in your property, you've got someone who's already there and able, potentially, to water the garden.
I thought we were going to say tasks, talking like whole DIY projects.
Yeah.
But
Power wash the patio.
Yeah, I do like the idea of the watering the garden, because there'll be people who have obviously king gardeners, that is a benefit if somebody came along.
Yeah, and going one stage further than that, I mean, this isn't for everyone, but if you've got pets and they're pet-friendly visitors, you may well be able to agree with them to look after your pets. Certainly if it's...
I thought you were going to say abandon your dog rather than look after your pet.
I'm thinking of more like tortoises or like fish or sort of pets that don't need like day-to-day maintenance. But yeah, you could do dogs as well. I mean, who knows? You can also agree to swap other things, and not just the property. I'm thinking things like cars and bikes. Again, saving money on renting bikes out or renting cars. Obviously, make sure you sort out the insurance side of things, but that's another benefit. Another key benefit to this is you can ensure that your home is ultimately safe, because people are staying in that property, which is going to make it safer. You can obviously tap into the knowledge of the individual who lives there, which when you go on holiday elsewhere, you're kind of winging it a little bit and using Google. Obviously, what happens in this scenario where you're doing house swaps, there will almost always be like a pack that the homeowner will leave you, and that will have Wi-Fi codes and it will have places to stay. Another thing that they might do for you, it's not essential that they do it, but it is a benefit. You may get things like, National Trust membership passes, leisure passes to the local leisure centre, things like that. Because it's a reciprocal arrangement, you want the best holiday when you go away. So if you can provide the best experience for them in a reciprocal way, then you're going to get a good deal.
Yeah, and one thing to point out, because when we were talking about this previously in the office, and it came up about the swapping, and I'd be sitting there thinking, well, why would anyone want to come to my house? Because I'm thinking it's got to be something amazing, that I live somewhere in a great big house and it's somewhere that's incredibly fascinating. But it wasn't until Andy was discussing it with his friend, and then we discussed the topic and explained there are a lot of things more than just accommodation. You don't just go away for the accommodation. When you go somewhere, for example, you may live not too far from a major city. So you could live, for example, in Kent somewhere, and you may think it's in the middle of nowhere where you live, but that is exactly what people want. You might have easy access by train to London. And if you're a tourist, being able to jump on a train for half hour, 40 minutes won't seem like much. It might do to you when you commute, but for them, it's not a big deal, because they may come from another country where it will be a long journey to the nearest city, or they may be able to access the coast, the local seaside, or they have castles, like you mentioned, National Trust, that are nearby they can visit. So it's actually, the location could be incredibly useful, because they are willing to travel around because they are on holiday. So when you think of it like that, then you can see why somebody might want to actually use your property, even though you personally might not think it's particularly enticing for a holiday location. It's not the actual place, your home, which will be a nice home, obviously, because you live in it, but it will be somewhere that they may like, but it's actually the location that they're really after as well, and the access and ease of which they can travel around the place. So that actually made me suddenly realise I get why people might want to do this. It's kind of like a bit like Airbnb, so it's a much more personal service.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've looked at some of the key benefits there. Let's look at the other side, because there are going to be people that are wondering, well, how safe is it? So traditionally, these holiday exchanges work in a reciprocal arrangement. So both parties are in regular contact. You have their phone number, their email address. So the person that's staying in your home, you're staying in theirs. And so there is an arrangement between the two of you that you're going to want to do the best, because you want to make sure that they're doing the same in your home. So your prized possessions and belongings are in their hands, similarly the other way around. So there isn't a huge amount of risk in those reciprocal holiday arrangements, especially in the case of member-only websites, because you're paying a fee and you get additional assurances through insurance products, which I'll explain later. Most exchange sites also use a rating system, and obviously receiving a positive review is a great way to boost your profile so that you can get the best holidays going forward. So everyone's in this sort of situation where they're like, we've got to behave, we've got to be good, because we want to ensure we can do this going forward. So that's kind of like your insurance policy, if you like. It means that most holiday exchange participants can be trusted when staying in your property. Obviously, accidents can happen, so you need to make sure you have relevant insurances in place. Now, it is unlikely that your existing home insurance will cover these kind of property letting exchanges, and so you'll need to think about how you're going to be protected. You might need to arrange separate insurance through your existing insurer. They may allow you to do so. go. But more likely, you should probably think about looking at a specialist company that cover this kind of thing. And there are companies that do it. And you probably want to consider, in addition, liability insurance, because obviously there are people staying in your home. If they have an accident, you'll need to have liability insurance to cover that as well. Home emergency cover is a good insurance to have. Now, home emergency cover covers things like burst pipes and gas and things like that. Ultimately, it's your home. You'll want to make sure that further damage doesn't happen. And so if you pay a little bit extra for these kind of insurances, it gives them peace of mind, gives you peace of mind. It all makes sense. The last thing to consider about sort of making sure everything's safe is consider PAT testing your movable, portable devices. So things like chargers and things like that in case of fires. Again, it's something that companies have to do legally. And because you're doing this holiday exchange, it doesn't cost a lot to get PAT testing done in your home, and it just makes sure that everything's safe. So they're kind of, and the last thing to think about is gas safety certificates and also carbon monoxide alarms and smoke alarms. Make sure they're all tested and working.
So the idea of it, your friend has obviously used this. They've been abroad, I take it?
Yes, yeah, many times.
So they've swapped their home and they've gone abroad many times, and they've obviously saved a small fortune in costs. Now, if people are interested, then what sites are there out there that they could be looking at?
Yeah, so there are, I'm going to list off 3 or 4. Guardian, as in the newspaper, Guardian homeexchange.co.uk. There's about 3,000 properties on there. They just do the classic swaps. They don't do the point system. Homelink.org.uk, about 7,000 properties on that site. They are a membership fee. In fact, all of these are membership fee ones, and they do classic swaps as well. And the last 2 I'll mention is lovehomeswap.com, 10,000 homes on there. They do classic and points system. And the final one, which I'm going to go on and give a little bit more information about, is homeexchange.com. They are the largest, and actually they're the company that my friend has used many times. So I can kind of give almost like a recommendation on there. Someone has used that, someone I know, and they do enjoy using them. They've got 180,000 plus properties on there. And again, they do the classic and the points swap system. What I can do now, if you like, is just to go through some of the costs, because it's not completely free, this thing. There are going to be costs involved. So in terms of costs, homeexchange.com, they charge $220 for the year. Now that gives you access to the portal, the website. You can see all of the properties on there. It also provides property damage protection and assistance in the case of cancellations and non-compliance. It also has a guarantee on the site that says if you don't have a holiday swap in your first year after paying the membership, they'll give you a second year of membership free. It's kind of like an assurance that they're pretty sure that you'll be able to arrange something with someone on that site. They also give you, as part of that $220, 500 guest points, which is this point system that gives you credits to do further swaps later. So yeah, that's kind of what you'll pay, but there are additional costs you need to consider. We've talked about insurances before. Make sure all of those are in place. They're not free, obviously. You also need to consider the cost of getting your home ready, because there'll be all those little jobs that, as a homeowner, you're happy to live with. You just put off the squeaky door, the dodgy kitchen cabinet, the thing that catches your foot. You know what to look out for, but they won't. So you'll need to fix those little things, really, if you want to ensure because you want to get the best review from them as well. So you want to give them a good experience. So that's going to cost, maybe the first time you do this home swap, maybe a few £100 getting all those little jobs done. You may also wish to store certain valuable items, maybe in the loft if you've got space, or a separate storage facility. Any financial documents, find a place that you can lock those away, because financial fraud is a thing. You just want to make sure that they're locked away. You will also need to print off certain documents, and you need to put a sort of cost on your time, because I know from personal experience from my friend, he's used several expletives on the time that's required to get your house ready for guests coming, because it isn't just a case of tidying around and then printing off a few documents. There are several weeks leading up to this holiday exchange and lots of stress.
But having said that, as you said, your friend is very positive on the whole thing, has done it for a number of years and has had positive experiences. It's quite an interesting thing, because if it wasn't for that experience, it would seem perhaps something you think was very niche, but clearly it's not. If Guardian are doing a whole exchange site, and there are obviously a large number of people are doing it, it's a very interesting idea. I mean, if you have done it, then I would really like to hear if you have. So send in an email, preferably put it in the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/money to the masses, because I'm intrigued. And also, if you are willing to share how much you think you've saved over the period of time you've been doing this, then that would also be quite interesting, because it is something, especially in the world of cost of living crisis, where people want to have a holiday, and also in a period where staycationing is getting more expensive. I think this is something that probably will appeal to more people. Right, so moving on to the next piece of the podcast, Andy, talking about homes, and inevitably mortgages are a thing that you will associate with owning a home, and I just want to do a piece on mortgages and interest rates. So 6 months ago, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I did a piece on where interest rates are going, or where they're predicted to go. So we're talking about the Bank of England base rate. Now, as you know, the Bank of England base rate influences mortgage rates. It's not the sole factor, but it's obviously a key factor in influencing mortgage rates. So if you've got a tracker mortgage, of course, it will likely track the base of Bank of England base rate with a sort of a portion, a certain percentage above that. So as the Bank of England base rate goes up and down, so will your mortgage during the period of time that you have a tracker, for example. And of course, variable rates are influenced as well by the Bank of England base rate, because obviously as that goes up and down and mortgage rates go up and down, then variable rates will do too, because your lender can choose to increase the rate in accordance with the T's and C's of your mortgage. And that can obviously be more or less than the Bank of England base rate increases. Now, obviously lots of people are particularly interested in fixed rates. So I want to talk about where the Bank of England base rate is predicted to go, and then what's been going on with the mortgage rates, particularly fixed rates, because there had been a period where more and more people were looking at trackers because they thought the Bank of England base rate was going to be coming down, and then we seem to have another shift where people are fixing again because they were panicking that the mortgage rates would go up, because in recent weeks we have seen a trend again for fixed rates to go up. But before I get onto that, let's look at where the Bank of England base rate is predicted to be. So at the moment it's 5.25%. Back in November, when I last talked about this, the market was predicting that we would be at 5.19%. So basically they were predicting that we might possibly, an outside chance, start to see some movement on the Bank of England base rate lower. Well, of course, it hasn't moved lower. So it was, as they largely predicted, it's still going to be around 5.25%. The difference was that they then predicted that the Bank of England base rate was pretty much going to stay above 4% for the subsequent 5 years. So January 2025, it was going to be 4.77%. January 26, it was going to be 4.24%. January 27, it was going to be 4%, and pretty much stay at 4% for the next few years. We're talking into 2029. Where are we now? Well, we've had obviously a variety of, or range, I should say, of inflation figures that have come out. So some of them have been higher than expected, some of them have been lower than expected. And don't forget, the Bank of England adjusts the base rate to try and control the official rate of inflation, to bring it back within a 1% range, high or low, of the target rate of 2%. Now, it hasn't obviously been able to achieve that in recent years. That's why the base rate was increased up to 5.25%. If you remember, a few years ago, the base rate was only 0.1%. Now, the predictions have shifted markedly from where we were. So if you go back to November, I've given you where the market was predicting the base rate would be. If you go back to December, for example, we had a sudden drop in what the market was predicting. They suddenly had become enthused with the idea that inflation was going to fall and the Bank of England would cut the base rate much more quickly. And they had predicted that by the end of this year, we would be getting down towards 4%. And then by January 2026, we'd probably be looking about 3.5%. And we'd actually ultimately end up with the base rate around 3% in 2029. So the market kind of got ahead of itself, because then if I talk about where the base rate is predicted to be as of the predictions today, what the market is thinking, well, the market thinks that the base rate is going to be around about 4.6% in January 2025. So you can see that we suddenly, after November, the market got carried away with itself, predicted the base rate was going to be cut fairly aggressively throughout this year, and then we'd end up quickly getting towards 3%. The market has obviously readjusted its predictions. It now thinks the base rate is going to be probably around 4.6% by January 2025. It won't get down to 4% until about January 26, and then it will fall down to 3.6% by January 27. January 2028 will be around 3.46%, and it will stay about that level into 2029. Now, the one thing to bear in mind is that these predictions do vary relatively quickly. So we already seen the change between November to December, now to May 2024, where we are now. But if we go back to July 2023, so we're not even talking a year ago from this show, from the publication of this show, the market was predicting that the base rate would be about 6.25, almost 6.5% now. So it shows you how the market gets these things wrong. But what I wanted to highlight to people is that if you are thinking about or wondering where the Bank of England base rate might be in the future, the current predictions are that it's not going to be as low as people had predicted when we were coming into this year. It's ticked up a little bit, but long term they think we're going to get back to around about 3.4% in about, or 3.5% I should say, in about 3 years' time. So that will therefore have a big influence on the mortgage market and on fixed rate deals. And don't forget, there are other factors in terms of the access to borrowing and things like that will influence the rates that lenders actually will lend to you. But I just want to focus now quickly on the mortgage rates, the best ones that are out there at the moment. So going back to November when we last covered this on the podcast, if you had a 60% loan to value, the best 2-year fix that you could get at that point was 5.3%. Now, as I make this podcast, the best rate is 4.75%. So you can see there's quite a considerable drop there. But earlier this year, we had got down to almost as low as 4.3% on a 2-year fix. Now, I mean, these are 60% loan to value, and there are certain assumptions we put in there, but that is roughly the best deal you're going to get at the moment. These do change. We do update an article on the website that gives you the best deals, and we update that at least once a week, and it's often twice a week as the rates change. So we'll put a link in the show notes so you can monitor that and actually bookmark that page. But if you are looking at, say, a 90% loan to value, then that would be, at the moment, for a 2-year fix, you're looking at something a bit more like 5.19%. So rates have been creeping back up again in the last month or two after we'd actually seen them start to fall. So that is a reflection of what the market is thinking about the inflation figures, the official inflation figures. Now, if we're looking at 5-year fixes, the best deals at the moment are 4.34% for a 60% loan to value. If you go in for a 10-year fix, you're looking at something like 4.64%. The point is that 5-year fixes are now cheaper than, obviously, 2-year fixes. You assume that because they are predicting that the base rate is going to come down from this current elevated level. The 2-year fixes are obviously cheaper than the current tracker rates. So if you're looking at the 2-year trackers, then you are looking at something that's pushing closer towards 5% because the base rate is currently elevated. If you're looking at the average rate, because I'm looking at best here, so we're talking about people who've got the largest equity share, so they've got a loan to value that's probably about 60%. But if you're looking at higher loan to values, then you're obviously going to get higher rates. But also, if you look at the market as an average, because you're not going to always get the best rate, it's going to depend on your personal circumstances. But if you look at the overall average for the market, then it's around about, as we make this podcast, it's around about 5.74%. And that's for 75% loan to value. 90% loan to value, it's about 5.84, which is about 0.8% above the best rate. So just to give you an idea of what the market's doing, if you're looking at the SVRs out there, and if you're somebody who's going to just drop off your current fixed rate and just say, well, I'll just go on the default rate, the standard variable rate, well, the average at the moment is 8.5%. So if you are coming to the end of your fixed rate deal, you do need to go and seek advice and look at the options out there for you. It might not just be fixed rates, you might look at tracker rates, you might look at discounted mortgages. So there are a range of options out there, but do make sure you go and get advice. The message is that the rates aren't falling as quickly as we had predicted, or the market had predicted just 6 months ago. So the slightly bad news for people who are coming off their fixed rate deals now, it's not as good news as perhaps they were hoping for, but you can still get good deals if you go and speak to a mortgage broker. But you've got to get used to the idea that you will be, unfortunately, paying more or higher monthly payments than you are currently.
Okay, so moving on to the final piece of the podcast then, we're going to be doing another piece on a bit of frugality, saving money, and we're going to be talking about a zero spend month. It's raising its profile on social media at the moment.
Yeah, so recently we did something called Loud Budgeting on the podcast, and it was, that is a phenomenon. We'll put a link in the notes, actually, so you can listen to that episode. But that is something where people have been going on social media and talking about their aims in terms of budgeting for maybe a particular period of time, what they're trying to achieve. And by stating what your aim is, it can help you succeed in achieving your saving goal. And so loud budgeting is one thing, but there's another trend that's been appearing on social media and it's been getting a bit of attention, actually, especially in America, and it's called a zero spend month. Now, if you listen to this podcast long enough, you will have heard of the idea of a zero spend day. Now, I'm a big fan of a zero spend day. So this is the idea where you try and cut out all discretionary spending. So you're always going to have things you have to spend money on, but if you look at things that you have a choice, then you can cut that down and try and spend no money. Now, one step further is to try and increase then the number of zero spend days that you have. So it may be that you go to work and you obviously going to have to pay for your travel. That is something you're going to have to do, but you might make your lunch, for example. You don't buy that coffee, as you try and reduce your discretionary spend. Now, you could then extend that to a zero spend week, but obviously this idea of doing a zero spend month is something that's a much larger commitment. And in some regards, people look at their budgets more on a monthly basis than a daily basis. So you don't necessarily look at how much you have to spend every day when you're budgeting, even though the budgeting apps will do that for you. You tend to look at how much you might have for a discretionary spend in a given month. And so zero spend months are quite interesting, particularly if you use the 50-30-20 principle. You've already applied that to your finances. So just to recap, that is obviously where you get your money coming in. You might look at your net income and you look at trying to get your bills, which is your necessary spending, to be about 50%, no more than that, of your net income. Then 30% is obviously attributed or made available for discretionary spend, and then 20% of your money is used towards repaying debt or saving for your future. Now, that is just one idea. There are variations of it. But if you already apply that, then you would know roughly what your discretionary spend budget is a month. And if you don't know or have that information, then I'll put a link in the notes of the podcast that goes to a budgeting spreadsheet that we created that will help apply that principle to your finances and help you build a budget, but also to our reviews of the budgeting apps that exist out there that can also help you get control and quantify your spending, and therefore be able to apply these principles to your own money. So you can see how much you are spending on things you don't necessarily need. So the idea of doing a zero spend month is to not spend money on unnecessary things. And that is going to be quite difficult. And this month has been a month where I've kind of applied this principle as well as I can to my own finances. Now, to do that, you have to have everybody who's involved in spending money, even within your family, on board. So that might be your partner or your children. And so the benefit of trying to do that is that it might be able to help you save money towards something that you might want. It could be, perhaps we're talking about holidays, you might decide that we're going to do a zero spend month, or try to do one, so we can try and put some money aside so we can have some time off. Or it might be you trying to do it for like DIY or something like that, trying to save some money. One of the benefits of a zero spend month, of course, is that there's a mindful element of it. There's a very deliberate, conscious spending pattern, which is something that I think is a good habit to get into. So you're starting to look at things and make decisions. Like today when I walked into the office, I made a conscious decision to obviously make my own lunch and avoid buying breakfast, which is something that I might do if I'm particularly hungry on the way in to work. And so trying to make conscious decisions that will help you try and keep to your zero spend pledge. So when we're talking about zero spend, it is going to be difficult. So you've got to try and not spend on unnecessary things. And that might be things, particularly when you read around the subject. People obviously particularly look at things like coffees, alcohol, might be haircuts. One thing I do think is difficult is if you're going to do this, and this is my advice, if you're going to do this, pick your battle. So by that is choose a month that is going to be easier to try and achieve this goal, or get as close as you can to it, rather than just doing the random month that might be the next one. So the reason I say that, if you try and do this in December, you are going to struggle, because not only is there Christmas, but you've got the Christmas parties and then the presents and things like that. So I would say pick a month. Now, for me personally, right now is pretty good, because it's a period of time where you'd hope the weather's improving, so there are things you could do that are freely. You might go to do outdoor things that are free with the children, but also my own particular life. I spend a lot of time driving around, taking my daughter to football matches that she plays for. And of course, we're just getting to the end of the football season. So it means for me, I suddenly have less money that I'm having to spend on things that involve having to obviously buy petrol and having to perhaps feed us when we're on these trips and all these sorts of things. It's easier for me to control my spending, because I've not got some large spending going on in a month that could fall into the discretionary category. So plan the months you're going to do it. It is all about planning. So you've got to do things like plan meals. You've got to do things like, which I'm doing at the moment, is I'm planning on just spending most of the month gardening. Now, I know this might seem tedious. I don't mind it too much. I kind of taught myself to quite like gardening now since I've moved house. But I'm getting things done. And DIY is something that I've started doing a little bit more this month. Now, I'm doing it on things that are going to be cost effective, that aren't going to cost me too much money to do. And so there's been things, well, I don't mind sharing with the podcast people, but listeners, that we've had these rather irritating things like a toilet that it doesn't quite flush how it should do. I've managed to actually spend time getting that fixed, because I'm not doing anything else, and it didn't cost me too much to do it.
So you're getting your house ready for that home exchange I was talking about.
Well, do you know what? When you said that, Andy, I did think maybe we should go with home exchange. I'm not sure my wife would actually buy into the idea, but it's things like that. You start to be able to think, well, are there small things you could do that in the long run are beneficial, and they also things that you've been putting off. I have to say that you need to get friends on board. That is one thing if you're going to do it, because you might need to change your plans, but you might end up doing things that are more that you have people round, or you might have things that you change the way you do things. So I'll give you a good example. There are people, say you've got family and you regularly might go and take turns visiting each other. You could do something whereby if you're the one who's hosting often, that you might change that and you might visit them, or you might end up divvying the cost of the barbecue or whatever it is that you're doing. So you can start to be mindful a bit more and conscious about the spending and how much things cost. And you might not necessarily go out. You might meet people and go around someone's house or do something slightly different. I think it's got a nice crossover with the allowed budgeting idea. If you tell people what you're doing, then they may be able to sort of help you do it. But also, you've got to reflect on what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you're trying to achieve it, because you're more likely to succeed if you do. So if you might be trying to save a certain amount of money by the end of the month for a certain reason, and if you stick to that and you're conscious of it, then you are probably going to be more successful. And in a previous podcast, I mentioned that in order to try and stick to a monthly budget, I do try and be more frugal, conscious in the first couple of weeks, just after payday, because the usual thing is you kind of blow out and you start spending more money just after payday. I try and do it the other way around, because I'm more likely to succeed, because I kind of under budget for a period of time, and then inevitably you start to spend maybe towards the end of the month for whatever reason, but you're more likely to get there. And so what I'm doing is doing something slightly different. It's kind of like this idea of a zero spend month, but it was more of a commitment to doing a number of zero spend days, which turned into weeks. But you could almost change this up by saying you're trying to do a streak of zero spend days or a streak of zero spend weeks before you go for a full-blown zero spend month if you feel like this is a bit too much. And the thing I like about it, if you go back to a previous podcast, which we'll link to again, is about money habits. One of the things, if you try and build a habit, you need to do it over a period of time. and you need to. And streaks are something that do reaffirm and condition you to create new good habits. So I would try and do that. And at the end of the month, it's a very good idea to also reward yourself with something. So if you are saving up or whatever the money might be, you might actually have some money that you are deciding you're going to treat yourself with a night out or something, whatever it might be.
I think that point is particularly key, because I know if we're using analogies, if we're going to move, if we're going to think about things like dieting, you hear these stories about people who do these crash diets, and then when they come off them, the first thing they do is they fall off the wagon, they eat loads of food, and then get back to where they were at the first stage, or even worse. But one of the key things about dieting that they say is reward yourself and treat yourself often, because then you don't feel like you're depriving yourself so much. I think that's a key thing there. Reward yourself at the end, and then you're not likely to do a big splurge because you feel deprived.
Yeah, and one of the things, there is a suggestion that I liked, is to give yourself maybe one free pass. And it was the idea that you do have a day, that you have one free pass where you can have a day where you do spend, because you just need that release during the month, and you've got that there if you want to use that day. Today's the day I am going to go and do those things, because the reality is life, it doesn't always go according to plan, and there are going to be months where you have lots of birthdays, so you don't want to do this in a month where you've got lots of birthdays. In my family, around Christmas is a nightmare. There's loads of birthdays, and obviously there's Christmas in there, but you've got to be able to plan this and be realistic to how much you're going to save. So I'm throwing it out there to people on the podcast. I'm a big fan of zero spend days. I like the idea of trying to stack them, and I like the idea of trying to do maybe a zero spend week. But for some people, you may be a zero spend month, or a limited spend month is perhaps another way of looking at it, because I tend to budget monthly anyway. And so if you can try and do that, and you might end up having a goal that you can achieve. Because the thing is, if you do a zero spend day, then that's great. But then if you've got to have an element of consistency, because you can zero spend one day and blow out the next, then you've really undone the good work. So by extending the period, you're more likely to see a material benefit. And one thing I always sort of look back on is the lockdown lifestyle. I've talked about in the podcast at the time. If we all remember what it was like, not the world of lockdown, not the social deprivation part, but the element of where we were not spending money on things that were fairly frivolous and discretionary because you just weren't able to, because the things weren't open, the cinemas weren't there, the pubs weren't open. So there's an element of that lockdown lifestyle, but you can obviously mingle and still do what you want now. And so I think that we've all done it. We've all been able to do it. But now I think that this is an idea that I think a zero spend month or a limited spend month is perhaps a version that I would prefer. I think that is something that would be great for people to try, but do it deliberately. Pick a month where you think you might achieve it. And who knows, if you manage to do it, then it could actually start to form better conscious decisions and better money habits.
Yeah, and it could be something that you book in like every year. It must, it can be your month that you do your thing. So you have your Christmas month is your really expensive month, and then you have your February or your May, which is your savings.
But you say that because people do it in January, and the thing is that's just people do that by association with Christmas, but it might not be the best one for them. So I think it's a good idea, and it's almost like that thing people do the dry January. And maybe there's equivalent with money. Maybe we should create it. Maybe we should create a campaign where there is a month where we do this whole idea.
I'll come up with some sort of clever name for it. We'll workshop that separately.
I think that's funny. Andy says a clever name. What he means is a cheesy name.
Something that rhymes. Okay, so that is it. We are done for this week. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so in the usual way. It's Damien at moneytothemasses.com, or you can contact me, Andy, at moneytothemasses.com. Please don't forget to review the podcast. It really does help us share and spread the word. So go to your podcast app of choice, give us 5 stars. Let us know if you do that as well, and you could win a Money to the Masses mug. Do check out our socials in all the usual places. Please, of course, do visit www.moneytothemasses.com/podcast. I don't know why I said www.
Does anyone do www?
It's so 1990.
It's staying in the podcast. We're not editing that out. So go to that web address, or use the internet.
HTTPS.
Go to the World Wide Web. Anyway, so I think that's it for this week, Andy. All that's left to say is until next time.
Until next time.